Hi, prospective listeners and I guess watchers on YouTube as well. I say listeners because yes, Lisette and I are now on Spotify and iTunes. And so I said our names, or I said Lisette name, they'd be like, who are these people? This is Lisette. Wave to the people, Lisette. Even though
Hi, everyone.
yes, they could hear you. They just couldn't see you if they're on the podcast. Um, and I'm Martina. And so, yes, welcome to our channel, Perspectives. Lisette and I should say we spent a few videos, the last few, talking about white supremacy. And, that's just going to continue being a series for a while because, it's so broad. Right. It's so broad and we have so much to cover. And, we think white supremacy is in everything. So it's going to be a few more videos about this. So we just wrapped up doing a video around the trial with Derek, Derek, and his last name was it Chauvin?
Chauvin?
Chauvin. He doesn't need to. It doesn't need.
I mean, the name isn't as relevant.
His name is not important. We all know he's the motherfucker that took George Floyd's life last summer. So that's what the last video was talking about, the results of the verdict and just our thoughts and perspective around it. So now we're going to take it a little bit more local here to Chicago, and then we're going to talk about a few other things around the 13-year-old Adam Toledo who lost his life. Oh, goodness. So has it been 2 weeks now? 3 weeks?
I believe it's been 2 weeks.
Yes. So not that long ago.
Not that long ago.
And he lost his life. I mentioned 13-year-old young man. He was in the Little Village community, right? Here in Chicago? Yes. So we're just going to spend some time just talking a little bit about his murder and a little background about that story. And again, just give our thoughts on that and our perspective. Then we're going to transition really to kind of talking about the history of policing, which I know maybe like, hey, we're kind of talking about it now, but we think it's just a great transition because we have spent a few videos talking about police and officers, and we're probably going to talk about it again. So we're going to spend some time talking about just the history of policing and kind of how we got to where we are, And so Lisette, I'll turn it over to you to kick us off with your thoughts around the young Adam.
Yeah, I remember when I saw something come across, I don't remember what platform it was. I don't know if it was Instagram or TikTok or somewhere where they were saying, young 13-year-old shot and killed by police. And there was the big conversation of the family not being able to see the video, the body cam video, and there was all these things, and they were talking like they might not release it, and there was a push to release it. So all that was going on, and they finally released it. And I remember being sort of like, should I watch it? Should I not watch it? And I ended up watching it because I just needed to know, like I needed to see it because it was, we're at a time and place where you can't always rely on what media puts out there. You can't rely on what others. And so I remember watching it, and I remember crying after I finished watching it. I remember just being my first reaction was being sad. Like it wasn't so much that I was like mad, like that came later. But I just remember being sad because it was, like I didn't grow up in Little Village. I only lived there until I was about 5. And I went there for church. If you see a previous video, if you go back to our video history, you can hear a little bit more about my sort of growing up in Chicago and stuff like that. But my connection with Little Village was really more around my church was there and did that. But even through work, I'm still sort of connected through that, and just understanding sometimes the boxes that you're put into when you say you're from Little Village or you're growing up there, and the options and the lack of options that exist for young people. and just individuals in general, and a lot of our communities. It's not just Little Village, but a lot of our communities. That's what made me sad, because I was like, this probably could have been avoided, at all. Like, there was this young kid out at 2, 3 a.m. There could have been uh points in this child's life where something could have led them a different path, which is true for all of us, right? Like, we all
Mhm.
either have opportunities presented or we don't, and that kind of gets us into a road or to a path. And that was what made me sad at that moment. And then when I started kind of hearing a little bit more about this, like, they were like, well, he was in a gang. What was he doing out at 2 a.m. in the morning? Where were the parents at? And I was like, why are we yeah, like, the whole idea of, like, you're gonna blame this young kid, and make the victim be uh in the wrong, right? Like, it's his fault. Like, he got shot because it was his fault.
Mhm.
And there was no accountability on the cop that shot him. And everything transpires pretty quickly. If you've watched the video, at least for me, it looks like it transpires pretty quickly. uh and there's a still shot of the video that you'll see a lot of media outlets use, where Adam is having his hands up. And if you watch the video, it's I would say not even a second or two later, the cop shoots him. It's just this quick thing of, like, he turns around, his hands up, and he's shot. um and I was like, I didn't understand, like, how do you shoot him? Like, he's complying. Like, he dropped the gun. If he had the gun, he dropped it, and he was turning around and he had his hands up,
Yeah.
and he complied, yet he died. He was killed. And there's uproar of, like, saying that he was murdered because only the justice system can say, or something like that,
That
that he's
pissed me
murdered.
off when I heard that.
So I read an article around that, and I was like, I'd say he was, whether you say killed or murdered, to me is the same
It's
kind
the
of
same
thing.
damn thing.
And obviously there's
Right.
nuances when it comes to the justice system, and that's something. But in the real world out here,
Real world.
like, he was murdered, and and thinking of that, and I remember feeling so mad that I was like, he literally complied. Like, you didn't even take a second to see if he had a gun or not. And, like, we'll touch on this a little later. Like, is it so much that you can't take a second? Like, you're so trained to shoot to kill that you can't even take a second to assess if he still has a gun? Because I'm like, even if he, like, and this is just me, my perspective, like, even if he did have a gun, you're directly pointing the gun at him. The officer still has the upper hand.
Mm-hmm.
Probably still shoot quicker you know uh whoever it is, whether it was
In most situations,
Adam.
the police always have the upper hand. They always do.
Yeah, and it just made me so mad. And I remember sharing, I had a conversation with someone, I won't say who, and we did not see eye to eye with the whole thing. And there was in that conversation, there's a lot of that victim blaming, right? That whole idea. And I remember sharing it with another friend and saying, like, what had transpired with the individual that I didn't see eye to eye. And they brought up the conversation of, like, that is very much victim blaming. It's very much like when you blame the woman for being assaulted or raped, like, oh, why were you out walking alone at midnight? Why were you wearing that? Why were you, like, all these
Yep.
things? And yet you don't hold accountable the person that assaulted you, the person that raped you, the person that shot you. Like, you don't hold that accountability piece to it. And all of
They
that
hold it
is,
accountable if the victim is a white man.
yeah,
Yes.
or a
Yes.
white woman
White
sometimes,
woman. Yes.
depending on who the assailant is.
Yep.
And all of that has just been on rotation on my mind when I think about this incident in Little Village with Adam. And how many more young people across the country have complied and still died
Right.
because there's this perceived threat that maybe you didn't comply. I don't know, like I can't you know put myself in that situation, but I do think of like, what are we how are police being trained? Like what does that look like, and does that need to change? Like, does the response we have, or is it you're responding this way because you are in a community that is predominantly Mexican, so Little Village is predominantly Mexican. Like, are you just because if you had been in a white neighborhood and this had been a white kid,
Like,
I stand on this hill that that kid would still be alive to this day if
hell yeah.
if it
They
was a
wouldn't be
white
sitting up
kid.
for white kids in Lakeview. You know better than that.
I
Uh-uh.
was like, you would have given the benefit of the doubt. You would have waited 2 seconds to see if the kid had complied. Like, I will stand
Exactly.
on that hill. Like, that will be.
And somebody else brought that up. It was like, why do we give white kids or white people the benefit of the doubt, but
Mhm.
you can't give it to other people of
Yep.
color? Or you can't give it to people of color. Why is that? Like, yes, we all know Adam. It was early the next day, that morning. Like, why is he not home? Why is he in a game? None of that has anything to do with this cop who shot him. Even if his hands were not up, it should. Why would you? It has nothing to do with that. So what? He's out at that time of morning. If he had a weapon, he got rid of it. It shouldn't matter. Why are you shooting to kill him?
Yep.
And again, like I said, we'll get more into the policing side and the history of that. But there is a history of that. Shooting to, like, if a cop feels threatened, then they have that, seems from what the research we've been able to gather,
Yeah.
that they are able to just shoot. They just shoot. And
Yeah.
they don't have to take the time to assess. And
No.
something's wrong with that. And I think, especially when that's very one-sided. You're
Yeah.
saying that you don't have to assess, because primarily what we're seeing, and again, it is about how the media spins things too. Um, from how we're seeing it, you don't assess with us. Like, I mean, but you assess
Right.
with white people. But why don't you assess with us first? Because I'm sure that it cannot be that black and brown little boys and girls are the only ones that are behaving badly and out
Right.
of character.
Right.
They're kids. They probably doing something stupid. They're children. Oh, that's what kids, hell, adults too. Like,
Right.
but why are white people giving that exception to the rule? And
Yep.
our people are not given that exception. We just get
Yep.
taken out. Don't matter. And that's just, to me, it's, yeah, like to say all this victim blaming, and even with some other cases and people who have unfortunately lost their lives to the same brutality, we are just never given that exception. Never given that exception. And like we've said on here before, we can't walk down the street. We can't be seen eating a sandwich. We go into a grocery store. If we go into a nice fancy restaurant or a nice shopping district or whatever, why are people look and questions? And
Yep.
it's just like, we just living our lives too. We just trying to get from day to day, from week to week. And it's so difficult to do that. Even, for myself, I've mentioned, like, having my own privileges. I know I am a privileged black woman,
Mm.
in compared to a lot of the different information that we talk about on here.
Yeah.
And so I recognize that. But at the same time, at the end of the day, police officers don't recognize that. They just see
Yeah.
another black person. I'm just another black person. Oh, Martina turned around too fast. What?
Right.
How am I supposed to turn? Like, what? Oh, okay. Okay, I'm trying to turn slow. Wait, slow down, slow down. And so it's like, again, we can't win for losing. And as you and I said a little earlier, like, we've never had run-ins with the cops. You and I, like,
Right.
we avoid that like the plague. Like, it's
Yes.
just
I
not.
will do everything in my power to
We
not have to
will avoid.
cross their path.
And we will, and it's at the same time, it's like, that's sad though,
Yeah.
because police officers are supposed to protect and serve, but we know that doesn't apply to us.
Mm-mm.
So we keep our distance. And
Yeah.
it's, it's so, again, it's just so sad to me. And I remember it's a Netflix movie that came out. Let's say you may remember the name of it. It's about the African American boys in New York. Oh God,
Oh
with
my
the case
God.
with the white girl. Oh my God. And one,
Five. It was
the
the
New York five or eight, it's something like that.
the
It's
Jack. Oh my! I can't believe I can't remember.
I
But
can't remember
yes,
the movie, but that movie, I
if you all
remember.
know, please put it in the
Yes,
comment
and I
section.
don't want to Google it right now because, but that movie, I'm sure a lot of you all will probably know the movie we're talking about because it actually won a lot of awards. It had a lot of accolades and things like that. But I remember being at my old job and I was at a community meeting, and one of the brothers there, one of the black men there, I forgot the exact topic that we were focusing on, but he was reporting out about watching this movie and how he had to tell his son, who is this his black son, he had to sit him down and give him the preface of this movie because I think his son was still
Mm.
relatively young. He's maybe 8, 9 years old, and he wanted to watch that movie with him, and just to kind of tell him about being a black man in America.
Yeah.
And he had this whole conversation with him beforehand. And basically, his son was under pressure and was like, well, I thought police officers are supposed to protect us. And he's like, that protect and serve is not for you. They don't protect and serve you. And I was like, this is just so fucked up. And like another friend of mine, again, I won't say her name, but a friend of mine I was talking with around the time when everything happened with Adam.
Yeah.
She's of Colombian background and her husband is Mexican background, so they're brown people. And her son is 5, 1 on 6, I believe, a cute little boy. And she is just like all mothers are right now because of this. Even if you're not a mother, but particularly mothers of black and brown children, it like her, and she said that she's gonna have to start having this talk with him. And she's like, and it's so interesting as you and I talked about in one of our previous videos about um, being in the box.
Yeah.
And she was basically saying that she has tried to do, her and her husband, to do everything they can. Like, they both are educated. They both have good jobs. They live in a white neighborhood or a predominantly white neighborhood.
Yeah.
And still, no matter how far you think
Yeah.
you're getting away from being Latino or being black or thinking you're giving your child a better life, this is still shows up at her doorstep. And this is, she's like, I'm gonna have to have this conversation with my 5-year-old son.
Yeah.
Like, starting to talk to him about this because she's like, he's wondering. He's like, Adam looked like me. What?
Yeah.
And it's just like, this is the world we get. Just, and we have just families and parents having to tell their little boys, the police are not for you. They're not here for you. They won't help you because of the color of your skin.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just all around fucked up. Again, that's how white supremacy works. That's white supremacy. Um, Only benefiting white individuals. Even if it seems like people of color are benefiting within white supremacy, at the end of the day, it all comes back to elevating white people or making white people feel safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you made me think of, white supremacy will have you believe that proximity to whiteness is going to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll have you kind of continue to reach for that or search for that or, seek that out, like that proximity to whiteness. But it doesn't, right? Something will always kind of happen to bring you back to reality and be like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, it doesn't matter how near you are to it, right? Whether you're black, brown, or Asian or whatnot, like it doesn't matter how close you are to it. There'll come a point where you will step too far out of your box that they're like, we got we got to push you back in.
Go back in.
Like you don't, this is not for you. Just because we let you be in some of these things doesn't mean that you can fully ever be, because that's just not the way. Like, but white supremacy will have you seeking that proximity to whiteness. That like it will have you believing that the closer you get to it, the safer you are, the better off you are. You know, it doesn't matter what you have to do to get there. Like, just stay close to that whiteness. You know, and you have people that go very far out to sort of say, I don't want to sort of be associated with my, Latino-ness or my blackness
Oh,
or anything.
absolutely. Yes.
Like I want to do anything I can to just get away from that. But how far?
The color of your skin doesn't change.
And then at what cost, right? Like at what cost do you lose what really makes you you? Like what formed you? Like what are you losing? And people lose relationships, family, like all, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and that connection to culture and whatnot, because that's what white supremacy wants, right? It wants you to conform to this idea of whiteness that lacks anything that makes you who you are, that'll erase anything that you like,
That's the point. Yeah.
and that's the thing. And you just made me think of that, and it's just like how 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 terrible that is, right? That we have to operate in this system, in this kind of thinking. And and when I say we, us that are not white, people that don't.
Yep.
And then you have white people that try to gaslight you into thinking that, well, that's not true, like they didn't mean it that way, or that's not how it is, or like you're reading too much into it. You're like, no, you just don't see it.
Yeah, you don't see it. And the thing is, how can we not read too much into it? It's just like it's so interesting, because I think all people of color probably, or most of us have had those sort of interactions with white people. And I think it's like, to them, they just see it as like, oh, well, I was just saying, I wasn't trying to be, why do you see it that way? Because that's the way it always is. Like, even if they don't mean it that way, that's just the way it comes off, because we are so conditioned.
Yes.
So that every time something is pointed out that's different, oh my God, an example. I was telling you, I've just finished watching over the weekend, Little Fires Everywhere.
Yes.
I was telling you about it. And, of course, there's a young couple in there. There's an interracial couple. There's a young high school couple with the girl's white and the guy's black. And they're going through the drive-through at like a fast food place. And they get the order. And she looks in and she's like, oh, I ordered no meat. So she just wanted a grilled cheese. Like, I think they were just going to put together just a grilled cheese for her. And she was like, oh, but the woman who's black, who is the woman working at the fast food place, looks at the receipt. She's like, oh, well, this doesn't say that. She's like, well, I'm saying that. She's like, I don't want meat. I want a grilled cheese. Thank you. And she said not that wasn't a smart remark, but she said something like, why are they always like this? And her boyfriend, the black man, is like, who's they? Because they black? And she's like, no, that's not what I meant. She's like, I would have said that if that was a white person. But just the fact, because that's immediately where my mind went when she said they.
Yeah.
And even when she got an attitude with the woman, I was thinking, so you're doing this because she's black.
Right.
And even her own black boyfriend was thinking the same thing. That's just where our mind naturally goes, because we have been conditioned because of white supremacy. We just think everything white people do, they just hate us. I think because hate is I know it's a very strong word, but that's what it is. We just think every time they say something, it's hate towards us because of the color of our skin.
Color of our skin. I think that's,
yeah.
And I think it's a hard concept for white people to understand.
It's really hard for them,
because they're like, well, no, that's not what I meant. Like, it's because she could have been like the service, and there's like all waitresses, right? Like, it could just be like, for that, like, it's all waitresses. But because there's been this history of them and they, us,
those
right?
people.
Like, those people. Don't get me started. I
hate
when people,
those people.
I'm gonna go off on a tangent.
Oh, go off and say, because those people. Ooh, I don't care if you're talking about the kids in the playground.
I don't care.
Those people,
because it's just, and I struggle with this, you know, professionally.
Oh yeah.
And I'm just, I remember an incident that I actually brought this up to a person in leadership because it bothered me so much that in this meeting where we were talking, I was talking about community and stuff, and people just kept saying, well, those communities, those people, and these communities. And I'm like, can we say our communities, our people, like our residents? Like, why can't we just say it's ours? Like
Exactly.
this is where we work. This is like this is our like, this
Our
is
communities that we work
my
with.
city. This is like, and it just bothered me. So I took it, and nothing was ever done about it. I was sort of just,
Typical. Yeah.
I was, you know, gaslit into sort of like, they didn't mean it that way. They didn't mean any harm. And at that time, I didn't have the knowledge and the words and the phrases that I have today, that I was just like, I just had to leave that room and not really care much about it, or
I
not
remember you
really
telling me about this comment. Yes, I
push
remember.
it. And I just, you know, but I think back and I'm like, oh, if I had the knowledge that I have now then, I'm like, oh no, like it's just, it would have been a completely different conversation. But, you know, and it was, interestingly enough, that individual actually acknowledged that incident in a meeting that we were in a meeting where we were talking about diversity and inclusion, and he acknowledged it. And I was like, well, it took you like 3-4 years, but
Long enough to figure it out.
at least you got to that. But I mean, for
Yeah,
some,
at least they did, because some don't.
the amount of time it took for an individual to think about an incident that happened, you know, 3-4 years ago, or a conversation, it took them that long to kind of realize, like, yeah, I should have done it differently or handled it differently. I'm like, it's gonna take a long time. But y'all don't, if you're talking about places that, you know, you live in or that you work in, just say our communities,
Oh yeah,
our residents,
yeah.
or Chicago residents, or whatever city you're in. Like, just don't, it's so
Again,
demeaning.
you know, I gotta bring baby microphone back. The
Bring it
pettiness
back.
in me is back. The pettiness in me is like, white people needs to know what it feels like to feel uncomfortable. We have felt uncomfortable and probably will feel uncomfortable. And I say we, I mean people of color, felt uncomfortable our whole lives, from grocery stores to classrooms, to gatherings, whatever, walking down the street. We always feel like there are eyes on us,
Yep.
or we all, as we talked about the code switching, how we
Yes.
switch the way we talk. And I think white people are starting to kind of understand the idea of the code switching. But it's like, they just, I think some things you just have to go through. They just need to be uncomfortable, because
Yeah.
we have been meant to feel uncomfortable our whole lives.
Hmm.
And so, you know what, Karen or Cody, you got to feel uncomfortable too. And it's not reverse racism. It ain't
It's
worse
not.
racism. We have put up with a lot. We've still put up with a lot. That's what this whole channel's about. Everything that we putting up with.
Yeah.
But our whole lives, we tiptoe around, because that's, again, is white supremacy from
Yeah.
everything we do, top to the bottom, bottom to the top. So if you feel uncomfortable, that's you. I mean, that's kind of a choice you're making, to feel uncomfortable, when you can just talk it out and talk about, well,
Right.
hey, like, you know, he could have been like, you know, I mean, even though he's recognized it now, 3 or 4 years later, but it could have been like, you know, let's say, I think you bring up a really good point. Can you maybe tell me a little more about, like, you know, help me understand a little bit more what you mean, something, you know, instead of like getting so defensive about stuff. Because I mean, hell, every time we get defensive about something, apparently we get shot. So
Right?
you know,
We
so
get labeled something. We get
yeah,
labeled.
we
We
get
get,
labeled the angry black woman, or the spicy Latina, or whatever it is, the over
oh, she's gonna get
sexualized.
mad. She's gonna
She's
get
gonna
mad.
get mad, you
She'll
know.
start
So
shaking her head.
right, like,
You know, I do shake my head when I get mad, but that's not here or there.
that's not here or there. I think it is time for white people to just feel uncomfortable, because in order for change to come about, some people are gonna have to be uncomfortable,
Yes.
because they've been in positions of power since the beginning of time. And so I think there are going to be uncomfortable moments, but for order for us to have equity and equality, people are going to have to be uncomfortable, because everyone else of color has been made to be uncomfortable their whole lives. So you need to know what it feels like to be uncomfortable before we can get someplace.
Yes.
And where we all are comfortable together. But a little while, I think white people just gonna have to suffer because we've been suffering. So just get in line. You talking to the choir over here.
Just get in.
Get in. Yeah.
Just get into the uncomfortableness, the suffering, the not being gaslighted all the time. Like, you know, all these things that kind of happen. And the reason why I feel so strongly about words like them, those people, those communities is because it lessens the importance of the people. It allows people to just discard communities, just to discard a whole group of people, you know. And I think about that in the realm of, you know, Adam Toledo, who lost like you can just discard him because like, oh, he was just one of those kids. He was one of those kids that was just, you know, and it's like you just can't discard them because you, and it's like, and that's why I feel so strongly about words, you know, because especially words, because it's like you're discarding people, you're discarding communities, and I know a lot of communities are trying to change and they're trying to change their narrative, but you know, it also helps when other people choose not to say certain words or are more mindful of how they describe, because I'm guilty of it. Like once in a while I will say, you know, these communities, like, and I'll catch myself and I was like, oh, I'm like the white supremacy is coming out. I was like, because
we all do it. We all
so, you know, it's so ingrained in everything. Like we've talked about, like it's so ingrained, but like when it comes, it's just like you have to also call yourself out. Like you have to like be mindful and doing that, and it takes a lot of work. Like it's not easy. Like you and I talk about how exhausting it can be, even when we're going through this journey of like even learning, and when we talk about other ethnicities and races that we don't interact with often, and we're trying to learn, it's an exhausting journey, but we're doing it because we know the importance of it. And I need white people to be like, it might be exhausting, it might be tiring, it might make me feel uncomfortable, it might, you know, I might have to just give a lot more time than I used to it. Like you have to lean into it, because if other ethnicities, other ethnic groups, if we're doing the work because we know how important it is, how much more important we know white allies are in this whole thing, you know. And I know we got to circle back to policing.
No, but you bring up some really good points. Yeah, I mean, you do. Yeah.
And it's just, I think it's important because we can't have a change in systems if we don't have white people who are willing to be like, we're going to jump in with you.
Yeah.
And we're going to, because I've said it, you've said it before, you and I, we don't have the power in our color of our skin and our ethnicities and all that to make change in this country.
Yeah, we still need white people. We still need white people.
We don't have it. We don't have it. It's white people. Like
it's white people.
It's all white people.
It's the white people. Again, that's because the white supremacy is set it up that way. We need white allies. We do. Like we can't, people of color can't do it by ourselves because of the suppression, the oppression that we are still dealing with. We need white people. So we need the colonizers. we need them in order to help get equity and equal rights for everybody. Because they are part of the story too, the narrative. Much as some of them don't want to be about it, they are. You have to be about it, because in order for us to get these systemic changes that we keep talking about, everybody is going to have to play their role. And just like you and I said, we've been in uncomfortable situations. Shit, sometimes I'm in uncomfortable situations a lot. You remember I started my old job. I think I told you this story. Again, I know we off tangent, but I got to tell the story. I do not speak a lick of Spanish. Lisette and a few other wonderful Spanish-speaking friends of mine have given me words and tidbits here, but I'm not a native Spanish speaker. I actually think Spanish is a very hard language. I
don't know why people say that.
I'm like, it is so hard, and the way, like the wonderful way you say it, Adam's name. I'm like, Adam Toledo, it rolled off your song, like your tongue so beautifully and so graciously. And I would love to be able to speak it. But I remember going to one of my first meetings that was in Little Village, and I went to a community health workers meeting, all native Spanish speakers, some of the immigrants. And I ain't speak a lick of Spanish. I felt so out of my element. I was so out of my element. Being in Little Village, because it is predominantly Spanish speakers, and
Yeah.
I don't speak the language. Not necessarily. I'm like, that was the reason I was nervous, because of the language, not because of being in Little Village. But then going to this meeting, which I had to go to this community meeting. I wanted to go because I do
Yeah.
want to be a part of that. But I was hella uncomfortable. I was, and it was, I think, a meeting we had right before Mother's Day. And it was a lot of us, about 20, maybe 20 plus people.
Mm.
And each of us went around, introduced ourselves, and said, what were we going to do to help celebrate Mother's Day, either ourselves or our mothers in our lives, wives, whatever, girlfriends, whatever. So each person went around and did, every person speaking in Spanish, everybody, even the other guests who were not native Spanish speakers, everybody speaking Spanish. I get over to myself and I'm just like, hola. And that was it. That's the only Spanish I did.
That's it.
And I just introduced my name. But people, I mean, I was just scared. And I guess because I was like, oh, I don't know if they're going to judge me. I'm like, the black girl. I don't speak the language. But it was not that at all. I was there, and everybody was so nice. Like, everybody that was coming to the meeting had brought home cooked food, because
Oh,
like we were eating too while we were there. And so they were like, get some to eat, get some to drink, get some food, make yourself comfortable. And it was just like all this fear for nothing.
enough. Yeah.
But it was just like, just so welcoming. And nobody said, at least is where I knew, it was like, she's not speaking Spanish. It was not that at all. And people, as all this to say is that we all in uncomfortable situations,
Yeah.
regardless of the color of your skin. And I just ought to say, just making an effort. You make an effort and try to understand.
Yeah.
People are oftentimes willing to work with you. They're willing to help you. As much shit as I talk about saying, don't ask me a question, I don't want you to ask me first. Ask Google. But if you do want to ask me a question, because you are our listeners and our viewers, feel free. Like, that's what Lisette and I are here for too. Like, we learning from each other. We learning from you all.
Yeah.
And just vice versa. I mean, I love learning. I love learning about new cultures and people and languages. And I just had to say that, because I think we all feel it.
Yeah.
But we all just, we just try our best to deal with it as much as we can, and just come with an open heart, open mind. I feel like I'm doing a sermon at church now.
You sure are. Preach
But preaching. But I turn it back over to Lisette.
No, I think thanks for sharing, because I think it's important for all of us to know that we've all been there. Like, we've all, especially when you're doing some of the work that you and I do, when we have to lean in to communities that we might not have ever stepped into, and in spaces that we've never really been to, and hear languages, like, and it's important to know that we've all been there, like, and it is uncomfortable. But I think I don't know, I think the one thing about being a person of color and having this sort of connectedness with other cultures that span across just like Mexican and things like that, but it's like there's so many threads that kind of intersect very nicely within all cultures, that like at some point you just feel kind of at home, like once you kind of get through that initial sort of like, oh my god, that fear that like, I don't know the language. Like, I know, like, I've gone to like spaces where it's been a lot of Arab individuals, and I'm like, that's a culture I don't know much about. Like, I know just what you kind of hear, but but it's like there's just that connectedness. Food kind of brings people together, and this sort of like home thing. So I think it's just important for people to understand that. And I think it's important for especially like white people to be like, just lean into it, and and you are going to come across some people that are going to be very rude to you and not want to teach you anything, and it's okay. Like, just walk away from them. Like, if you're on a journey and they're not helping your journey, they're not meant to be on your path anymore. Just go on by, thank them for whatever, and just go by. Like, you also don't need rude people in your life. You don't, like, it's just, if they're not helping you, or if they're not wanting to, teach you or whatever, or anything, like, just, it's okay. Like, not everyone, and you have to be okay with that, because not everybody wants to teach you anything. Like Martina said, she's like, ask Google first, and if you don't find the answer, then come to me. But do your due diligence, right? Like, be okay with people having boundaries to how they want to interact with you, especially as a white individual. Respect those boundaries.
Don't question them. Don't try to analyze.
Don't be entitled. Don't do that. Just be nice, be kind about things.
I think, and that's true. I think there's so much hate that we see in the world from everything we talk about, the stuff we don't even probably even scratch the surface on. Um, and I feel like that's what we often see. But I do think, one of the most important things, I feel like love is a big one. I think love and being kind to people, even if you don't like somebody, you can respect people and not really care for them. You can just have, like you said, have those boundaries with someone. And I think what the world needs is more people setting boundaries. We definitely need more love. We need more faith. We need justice, accountability, what we're talking about, and we need a lot of other things too. But I think we really, again, like I said, we are all different. I mean, you're not gonna find two Black people who are the same, or two Mexican girls who are the same. Everybody's different, but we have, like, there are common things that we all have in common. As I always say, we all want shelter. We all want the best for our families and friends, for ourselves. We all want to live comfortably, just make it from day to day. That's across the board. Everybody wants that. And I think those are some of the things we need to focus on, is that we all different, but let's learn how to respect each other while we're different. Because everybody's gonna be different or something. But it doesn't mean that they're bad people, or it's just the way the world is. And I think we just need to just be more kind to each other. I think it's just the way.
And some people make it very hard to be kind.
The last administration.
As an example, yes, last administration make it very hard to be kind, and individuals that support and continue to support that administration. But I think you bring such a good point of just like kindness being one of the things, and and love and things like that. Because I think a lot of people forget that at the end of the day, we're all human, right? Like, we're all human. We all
fuck up, and we all do
make mistakes, but we all hope to have access to what you just mentioned, housing and all these things. Like, we just want that for our families, for our future generations and whatnot. And I think it's hard to keep that in perspective and in focus when we see things like things that happened to George Floyd, things that happened to Breonna Taylor, to Adam Toledo, to Ma'Khia Bryant, and look at, like, it's hard to kind of keep that, and it's important for people to understand that. That's why it's important for others to be kind to each other, for others to sort of take on the hope for a little bit, because sometimes that light of that lighthouse gets turned off, and you no longer can see it. Like, hope is gone for a little bit, because you've been so embroiled in all this sort of what's happening within the police and just your everyday living, that you just don't, you just can't go on. And that's why I think it's important for people to respect, particularly white people, to respect people of color's boundaries when it comes to talking about issues, when it comes to what we are willing to share, what we're willing to show about our experiences. Because, this society, this, very white supremacist uh, culture that we live in has made it very hard to navigate, to be, as as a person of color, as a Black woman, and Black individuals. Like, it's every roadblock you probably could think of has happened, and continues to happen. Like, you repeat the same roadblocks, you see the same roadblocks come up. Like, it's like, and I know we didn't get into any additional conversation of policing, but I think what Martina and I really kind of dug into, and talking and exploring, it connects back.
Yeah, it
you
does.
know we know that, one thing that I continue to say, and I've told Martina a few times, is when you think about the history of policing, when you think about where and this is my perspective, my sort of what I've read and know, when you think about where I think it really kind of stemmed from, when you start collecting Black bodies because they've been freed, and the only way to get them back into slavery is to arrest them, that is something that historic is going to continue on. And that's where you see, and that's why you see, like, I know there's been books, and there's documentaries of 13 on Netflix, and and the 13th Amendment,
Yes.
and and when you see where, I don't think that's where it started. I think that's where, how we see it as today, what we see policing today, I think that's where it stems from, right? Like, collect, and and then the expansion of not including others, Latinos, and and brown bodies, and women of color, and if it stems from this idea that you know Black can only be used as someone that can um be a servant, or servitude,
Yep.
and or incarcerated, like, that's the worth that you're placing on it, and you continue to place it today. It's definitely something that needs to be changed. And I've said this before, like, our constitution, it has to change.
Motherfucker needs to change.
It needs to be reflective
It needs
of
to be
what
updated.
modern society is. And you just can't stick to this thing. And I know in the future we'll get into more of, like, some Christian nationalism and the impact that's had, but it definitely, I think, has ramifications for our constitution and where it stands, and why it's so difficult for people to wrap their heads around. Like, if you I honestly believe, if you want to change our policing system, if you want to see some really systemic change in policing, incarcerating, and everything, like, that 13th Amendment is a start. Like, how about we take away that phrasing that you can become a slave again if you're incarcerated? Like, that shouldn't be
That
there.
should not be there. And I think, like, which is why I think a lot of politicians don't want to touch the Constitution, because I mean, I really think it's going to set off stuff, which I do think, like, a revolution just might need to happen. It
Yeah,
just might need to happen. And I'm not trying to incite violence, anything like that, or hatred, but I
because
think
it
it,
doesn't have to be
it
violent.
doesn't have to be, but I didn't want people to interpret it as that way,
Right.
is what I mean. But it might need to happen, because somebody somewhere is going to have to do something with the
Yeah.
Constitution, because until then, I mean, it's just, that's a part of that systemic changes that need to
Yeah.
happen, is updating the Constitution, and nobody is touching it, and somebody's going to have to, because we can't make these changes without it, because the shit like the right to bear arms, and the 13th Amendment. I mean, even, don't get me wrong, I think probably one of the more relevant uh, Bill of Rights is that First Amendment. Yes, that freedom of speech and press and religion, that's probably will stay pretty much the same. I mean, but some of these other ones, they got to go. They got to go, or they got to be updated.
I don't.
Um,
I feel like we all need like a course in the Constitution all over again because some I forget what's in the Constitution. Sometimes I'm like,
well,
I
because I'm a nerd, I know the first 10 amendments are known as the Bill of Rights, and I used to know all the amendments.
that's what I'm saying. Like I mean I was with you. Like the Bill of Rights, I got that. But when you start getting into some of these other things and these nitty gritty of things, I was like, I think we forget, as and it's not that we forget. I think it's done intentionally, right? For people not to know. That's always
Yeah,
been that's always been something,
keep keep them ignorant. That's what you
like
want.
it's
Mhm.
it goes back to white supremacy. Like, how do
Yeah,
we see power? Like, how do we ensure that if y'all don't know, like I've been reading the book Cast. If you haven't read it, I suggest you do. But how do you keep the dominant caste in power? You make sure that others don't always know what laws, it's in our constitution, all these things. Like that's it's a whole other conversation to be had. But yeah, I think it's such as US citizens, as people that live in this country, like you should at least know your Bill of Rights and understand what they actually mean
Mhm.
and not your own interpretation of what they mean, because they're legally there's things that actually stands for and all these things, but nobody knows. We all say right to bear arms, but we all have different understandings of what right to bear arms mean.
Does not mean AK-47s.
It should
It's a fucking
no,
military. It's
no.
yeah. All right.
I will stand on that hill with you.
Us girl, like I'm all for people having. Look, I'm not anti-gun. I grew up in the South. My grandpa had guns. I've seen guns. I personally really don't want to be involved with them. That's not my thing. But for people who do, there are people that love hunting. There are people that just like
Yeah,
collecting guns. It is a thing. And yes, hunting rifles and pistols, shotguns, okay. But honey, when you start having military grade weaponry
yeah, no,
that you can purchase,
yeah.
that's a problem. We're not fighting a country. Even if we were, you as an individual do not need that type of weaponry.
That's why we spend billions of dollars on a military.
Billions of dollars goes into military every fucking year.
Yeah, so that they could protect us and use
Yes,
those weapons against whatever threat might come our way.
yeah, yes. I mean, again, and it's it's the white people with the guns because you ain't seeing brothers up in there. They won't even let you. Like you try to go into Walmart and a person of color buy. Why do you want a gun? What are you doing with it? Okay, we're gonna have to run a check on you. Okay, you're gonna be waitlisted. We ain't even gonna get that far. But for some
Yeah,
reason, these
yeah,
men.
that is something that you and I have talked about, like what that process looks like for a person of color versus a white individual. Like I'm sure it's out there somewhere. Like I'm sure someone has looked into it, but
Come on, that's
if
another
y'all
thing.
know, if y'all have some resources for us to look into that, please
Comment
let
on
us
that.
know. Because
Because
we're
we are
curious.
not gun people. So I don't, I can do the bare minimum research. I don't mind doing that.
Yeah,
But I'm not a gun enthusiast at all. I don't understand the culture, but doesn't mean like I respect people. Like, if you, like I said, some people like collecting guns. That's your thing. I respect that. That's cool.
you have a right to protect
That's what you want.
yourself if there's
Yeah,
a threat that comes to your home or
with a regular
whatnot.
ass gun.
That's we're not. Like I said, like I'm with you. Like I'm not against people having guns, but when it comes to like AK-47s, like I don't understand. Like what would you need that for? Like are
Exactly.
you like I know you're probably not hunting with an AK-47, and if you are, I'm a little concerned about that because it just doesn't make sense in my head. But yeah, I'm with you. Like I'm standing on the hill with you because it's just not, I know we didn't intend for us to get into gun
I know. We
gun
got to go.
control, but
This is
there's
really
just
what our conversations on the phone sound like.
but this is a glimpse into what we actually happen in our conversation. We'll start off in one subject and we'll go into it. So thank
10
you
different more. Yeah.
for sticking with us. But I think this is a good spot for us to sort of start wrapping this episode up. And I know we touched on a lot of different subjects, uh, but I hope you all see that what we're trying to convey is, when you look at the root cause of a lot of issues, of a lot of systemic problems, a lot of inequities in our, and we'll talk about our country because we can't talk about things that we don't know in other countries or around the world, but in our country, like, Martina and I definitely always say, white supremacy just kind of plays such a big role in it. And a lot of people want to say, well, it's racism, but racism only exists because of white supremacy. um and we'll continue exploring that. I think we were hoping to have more conversations around this, and it might not be as crazy as the one we had today in different subjects, but we definitely have some
Or it
thoughts.
might be. Stick
It
around.
might be like you don't know what you're gonna get with us, but Martina, any last thoughts?
I mean, just wrap us up a little bit. I would just say, people don't lose hope. I think losing hope is one of the, I think that's just so sad. And I
Yeah.
think we all have felt hopeless. And I know probably a lot of people do, regardless of your skin color. White people probably frustrated. Black and brown people frustrated. Everybody frustrated. But don't lose hope. I say, because just losing hope, it really just sounds hopeless. Like it just,
Yes.
um, it's just, yeah, I think for white people too, um, think about, I think, what it means to have hope, and how people of color have felt about having hope and having to maintain that and keep that and pass that on to their kids of having hope. And just now, we've started to see things progress. I mean, we got our first black president. We got a Jewish second gentleman. We have people of color on the Supreme Court. Except that other black man that's been up there for a long time. He needs to go. The one that has assaulted her. So I said it. I said it. But I think, yeah, just sometimes really just take a walk in somebody else's shoes. Like literally, I don't know, like putting on somebody's shoes, but literally,
Yes.
physically, metaphorically, and really take a walk in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah.
Because I always want to say to white people, how would you feel if you were black? Would you want to trade places with me? Would you want to trade places? Even the wokest white person,
Won't.
because they won't. They know how bad it is. They wouldn't dare change their life the way it is. I think even the poorest white person,
Mm-mm.
wouldn't. Hell no, hell no. So you think about that. Think about that. You would not even want to trade places, and
Yeah.
think about why you wouldn't. And think about people that have to live with that, being this color or living in a socioeconomic status that doesn't change. And that's the way their life is their whole lives. And so that's all I got to say. That we can wrap it on up.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for sticking with us, for continue supporting us. We appreciate all of our listeners. And we look forward to continuing these conversations, and we hope in the future to just kind of bring some additional voices as well, and get some other perspectives too, because we know that there are others who can bring and shed some real kind of facts and things to some of the things that we brought up. But you'll always hear our perspective. You'll always kind of get our truths, and being as genuine as possible as we can. So we appreciate you, and comment, share if you think this would be great conversation started with those around you. And yeah, we hope you just enjoy wherever you're at, and like I'll repeat what Martina said. Continue hoping, keep hope alive, and kindness going, and we will talk to you and see you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.